Welcome. Before we start drawing, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land on which we are producing this series, the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and to show my respect to their elders past and present and emerging, and to all First Australians with us today. Carmel, I'm going to hand you over to Carmel.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Last session we looked at partial blind contours with accidental tone, where we dragged the side of our hand on the page. Essentially they were it was a line drawing though. So for this session we'll start looking into further depth into tone itself. So the materials I'll be using today are willow charcoal. As usual, I always start my drawing with the willow charcoal. I've already drawn a frame around my page. So the willow charcoal I'll be using is, it's about 6 millimetre charcoal. That's about 14, I think. So one thin for points for line drawing and one that's thick, and I'll be using the side of that charcoal when I'm drawing. So we're starting off this drawing with a high energy exercise where we're drawing to a beat. It's really useful if you're feeling like you're a little bit stuck with your work, you're feeling a little bit low energy. It will really help you get your energy up. That's just another reminder that just like athletes, artists need to warm up as well. It's like if you're not feeling quite up to it, you can't just sit around waiting for inspiration. These are little exercises to help you get inspired and to get your energy up. So we'll also be using an eraser. We'll be using the eraser to draw. So what I usually do is this is like a Staedtler Mars plastic. It's the expensive one. The other ones for me, they don't cut through the page as well. So what I do is I cut a little cube, a little strip of it off, so I can use the very sharp edges to actually draw back into the page. The other thing I'll be using is the compressed charcoal. You usually buy it around that length, a little bit longer, but I always snap it off to have about half, because I usually use the compressed charcoal on the side. You use these towards the end of the drawing for the darker tone. And kneadable eraser, we'll be using that as well. Kneadable eraser is different to a usual eraser in that we use this for what we call lifting, where you actually, it's sort of like a little bit like blue tack, but I've tried blue tack, it doesn't work as well. So what you do is you press it into charcoal or graphite, and it lifts it, tends to get into the fibres of the paper, and it lifts the charcoal off. And then you twist it around like that to get to a clean area again. So like it's reusable, you can keep using it all the time. So that's quite good. So to start, and also I'm going to show you that's sandpaper, and I use sandpaper. The erasers get quite dirty, so I use the sandpaper to clean them, and you get back to the white. So that's really useful. One of my students made that for me. He's just stapled really rough sandpaper to a piece of timber. I use it all the time. It's very useful. And of course a rag. And so in addition today, we're going to use a metronome, which is a little tool that musicians use to keep to the beat when they're learning music or practicing, training again, warming up, same thing. So I'm going to use that today because we're going to make a mark on the page, two marks per second, and it keeps us in time and it gets the energy up and you get quite warm, and it's actually quite fun. So that's how we're going to start our drawing. With the metronome, you can either use an online, you can go on the internet and you can set a beat to the internet, or if you don't have anything, you just count in your head to 500. That's usually runs for about 4 minutes. So I have my 2 charcoal, I'll have my still life, and I'm looking at the still life when I'm making the marks, and I'm going to set the metronome. Here it goes. So I'm looking at my still life and I'm just going to move into the rhythm, just let go. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, but I am actually going to explore the still life as I make the marks. So it's nice and free. And my aim is to actually fill the whole page. So I'm just sort of like, even like as usual, just sort of moving around the objects, and you actually lift the pencil with each mark as well. So you're not like dragging it around the page. You're making definite marks. And even though it's quite abstract, I can already see in this drawing that you're getting a feeling for the objects, the energy of the objects. They're not exactly placed. When I finish doing this, I'll have to redraw back into it. So now I'm going to use the thicker one because I really want to describe the space around the objects. So I'm using the side of the charcoal. I'll just turn this off in case it's interfering with my speech. So I'll just count in my head as I go. So the side of the charcoal, because I really need the space in between as well. So you actually get quite warm doing this, and usually this is like a really good, if you have an easel, this is an excellent exercise to really get yourself warmed up for drawing. So my page is filling up. My aim really is to get just a little idea of the energy of the objects, but to fill the page with charcoal. And the all-important space, because space is why we work from still life. Generally, if you're working from a photo, you're not really conscious of space. Okay, so I think I'll leave it there. And then you can see that I have a page full of mid-tone. So what I like about this, it's a very fast way to get a drawing moving. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to focus on the still life. I'm going to begin the drawing as I usually do with the structure. I need to make sure that all the objects are going to fit on the page. So as usual, I'll just make the little marks. I have my rag. I can change things as I go. So I'll do the marks on the page of where I think the objects are and do my measuring basically. So that's the central vertical axis. And I'm traveling across here. So now that I've got lots of mid-tone, it really helps you let go a little bit and really explore the page. You're not precious. White paper tends to say I'm precious. So it's really good to get rid of those blocks from creativity. And this way I can just like, okay, I've got pages full of charcoal. I just need to move it around. So that's three aspects to the drawings really. It's adding with charcoal, subtracting with the eraser, and moving around. The eraser does that as well. So I'm just going to cut the end of this off now, and you'll see that I have a very nice, sharp instrument with which to subtract. Okay, so I'll just concentrate a little bit here and try and get everything in place so that it fits on the page. That needs to come down. So I think I'm going to lower. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. If you use your finger to move the charcoal, because our fingers are oily, it tends to press the charcoal into the page, and it's very hard to get it off if you need to. Because for me, to feel secure, to be able to really let go, I need to make sure that I know how to get back to the page if I really need to. So So this is a nice round object. Now it's another example of switching modes again. Central axis, then I've got the simple shape. That's the top of that object, travelling through space here now to get to the second object that intersects with that first one there. It might be, I think I was like, it will fit on the page. This is the tallest object, this one. So everything, I'm still just planning. I know I will have to change things again. You never get things right the first time. That's just nature, the nature of drawing. Because really, I think that also is a realistic example of the fact that drawing is really about exploring. So these are too high. I know I'm going to run off the page there, so I'm just going to wipe that. This might be a little bit too big, I think. So now I'm changing the scale. Constantly changing a drawing until you get it right, especially at this early stage of the drawing with the willow charcoal, because I know I can take the willow charcoal, I can cut away with the eraser very easily. So now I'll just draw with the eraser a little bit, which is the subtraction aspect of drawing. So, because I wiped that, that's all in there, so I'll just take it off again, but I can use the edge of that eraser to draw in, or cut in, I call it, because to me the action is cutting back to the actual page. And everything adds to the life of a drawing, really, like that white line next to a dark line. We like diversity when we look at art. I think that's the difference between illustration and art, is that illustration tries to give you everything, whereas art wants you to think a little bit. So I can see my three objects. I think they're looking pretty good. So now what I've done so far is we applied the mid-tone with the beat. Then I've worked out the structure of the drawing with this, which includes the scale and the volume and the placement. So I've added with the charcoal, I've subtracted a little bit with the eraser. Now I'm going to move the charcoal around to create atmosphere and just to create the tone of the drawing. So I've got the structure. Now I'm really going to go into more depth into the tone, which are the darks to the lights and how they relate to each other. So you always have shadows, and I'll just cut another piece because I've lost that. That's one thing about these erasers, they do have a tendency to disappear. Okay. So still connecting with the still life. Now I'm switching my brain into tone. So I'm just going to go through, pick up some light areas, and you can see with the erasers actually blending as well. If I press hard, it cuts, takes away the charcoal to get to a lighter tone, but if you just move it around slightly, it actually blends. And by blending I mean it's like really pushing the charcoal into the page. And like if you need to get rid of line work, like that for instance. So as I'm drawing, you can see now what I'm doing, I'm sort of like pretending that I'm touching the bottle so that the texture, to describe the texture. So now I'm measuring the tone, so it's darker behind the bottle than it is in front, so I'm just going to I'll still stick with willow for now, just in case I need to change a few things. And using the side of the charcoal is also a form of blocking in, so it speeds up the drawing a little bit. And you get these really nice edges with this technique. And you can see I need just a smaller piece of charcoal to get through this gap. See, I'm drawing the space, which is the negative space, basically. So see, that's like quite a, it's a shape. It's an object that's part of the drawing. It's not empty. Empty space is never really empty space. It has a presence. And if you look at Van Gogh's paintings, you see that he treated space as an object. Okay, so this is the darkest object, so I'm going to just reinforce that. Still going around, it's a round object, so the line work is describing the shape as I go, so that's, you're not wasting any line marks. And you see I have like a few, I just found that other eraser. You have a few mediums in my hand and I keep swapping from one to the other, so it's efficient. So there I just kind of switching into a blind contour, trying to get that shape. And really now I'll just move around the drawing, relating everything. So I know that it's quite dark under there. You've got these shadows, I can blend those. So this is a flat, that's the table, that's a flat plane. That's a flat plane that's probably mainly horizontal, and then you've got these objects coming up in space. So every movement of the charcoal helps describe the planes and the shadows and just the energy of the objects. See there, you can see there I've moved it, the charcoal up, but it's not relating to there. So that just shows just how important it is to think about running along planes and what you're describing. So now I think I need to work out where my table should be, and I think, so I've got, I don't, usually drawing the table doesn't work. It's never usually in the ideal spot. So I'm going to experiment a little bit with the charcoal, so because I know it's easy to take off. And basically the table will be an horizon line behind these objects. So I can either have a horizon line above that, which probably brings it a bit closer to the viewer, or I could have it down here. The actual line is up here somewhere. That's too high. I think it's cutting in too high on that bottle. So now I'm thinking about composition. I'm using the still life as a reference, but really, and it gets me started, I can work out the structure and everything, but in the end, my focus comes to the drawing and I give the drawing what it needs. So that horizon line is a decision I make as an artist as to where it should go, and that's why I will experiment first to see what I think. And for me, a lot of it's feeling what looks right. So I think the horizon should be around the top of this object here. But I just need to make sure it cuts through these two objects in the right, in a good spot as well. So I think around there is actually pretty good for that. So I think I'll just do it just below the lip. Just below the lip of that object there. Okay, so here I go. I've made my decision. Now I can actually put some pressure on my line. And now it's like a definite decision. And that's really important in drawing and making art. You need to make sure that your decisions are definite on the page. If you're indecisive, it shows in the drawing. Okay, so now I need to make a distinction between this space here, which is all air really, just space that we breathe, and this is a table. So I'm going to do that by moving the charcoal first. That's a plane, it's running along there. Okay, so now I'm just going to start moving a little bit quicker and just thinking about tone. So this is the lightest object, so I'm going to bring that up in tone. Oh. So this is the lightest object, I'm going to bring that up in tone. That's the darkest one. I'm going to now come in with some compressed charcoal and really reinforce these darker areas. So whenever I pick up the pencil compressed charcoal, I'm switching into a blind contour usually, because that's what I'll be using the line work. So you can see now this drawing isn't just a line drawing like the earlier ones, but it's line and tone. Nothing needs to be perfect. You're really just capturing, you're getting close to what you're looking at and interpreting and how you feel about what you're drawing. That needs to be darker in there. Okay, now I'm going into blind contour and I'm cutting in and I'm drawing the space behind these objects. Space, I think for me the best way to describe space is just to do it and the energy of it. Just think about it, it's like it's air, it has dust, there's a lot in space, there's a lot that we think we don't see, but it creates atmosphere. If you have smoke, it sort of creates a different atmosphere to when you have a clear sky. So that's all about space and air. And so because it's abstract, I just try to simplify it as much as I can. The expression of it. But the point is, the important thing is that you do actually try and express it. Okay, so I actually quite like this edge along here. I haven't drawn a line, but it's quite, and even though it's sort of tonally almost, it's a little bit darker than behind, but it's quite a defined edge. So I'm going to leave that for a little bit. I'm not going to touch that. But I think up here can be defined with some line work. So again, going into a blind contour, where your eye's on the object 90% of the time, and you're just glancing at your page. And that's a technique that's very sensitive to the touch. Just keep drawing until you get it right. Or you never really get it perfectly right, but you get close. So you never really get it right. You just aim to get close, because really drawing's about expression, and we all look at things differently. And I think expression is fairly subconscious, so that's part of why you need to let go, so that the subconscious can come through. So I've changed the shape here a little bit, so I'm going to cut back to the white there. Okay, so this doesn't really have a lip. But we need tone in here to describe that going down. Blend it a little bit. And once you get into the zone, it's quite easy. You just keep flipping from whatever technique you need for whatever drawing that part of the drawing that you're working on. Okay, so this is needs a little bit of work. This bottle does actually have a lip, which means that we have a nice little shape. Kind of awkward shape. Where you have that little lump there. Okay, so now I'm going to focus on shadows. So there's a few shadows down here. I just block those in. Fairly simple shadow coming up there. Then I move them around, describing the planes. This is forward and it's pushing back as I go because that helps to describe the actual bottle. This can go in a little bit darker. And I'm not looking in great detail, I'm looking at the masses of the darkness. And by masses I mean, it's like the big picture, and if you want to go into the fine details later you can, but you need to get the big picture first because that helps describe the shapes of the objects. It's round, emphasising it's round. So this one is the mid-tone, so I'll just get that further down in tone, a few shadows under here. So I'm adding with the charcoal at the moment, subtracting when I come in with this eraser. So you can see now that I'm coming in with the compressed charcoal, there's like another element, another layer. So you can see it's pretty clear now that drawing's about layering, especially when you start working with tone. And layering is about adding and subtracting and working with depth with your thinking of the drawing. So I want to distinguish the tonal difference between these two objects. I'm going to come back up with light with this one. And now that the longer you look at something as well, the more that you see, and I can see now that there's quite a round shape in there. These are highlights, they usually go in last. See, the arrays can really get back to the page. I don't think I really need them, they're not really doing anything for the drawing, so I'm going to take them out. But now I think I need to start drawing these negative spaces around the objects. A bit of darker charcoal. You can see on the page here that the willow charcoal is it's like a greyish colour, and the compressed charcoal is very dark, it's a black. They work really well together. So you wouldn't cover the whole page with grey, or you can with the grey because it comes off quite easily, but with the compressed charcoal, I take it a little bit easier and I always leave it towards the end of the drawing. And you can see here now that there's the paper's coming through the charcoal because I haven't blended it yet. I don't think, to me, that's not very pleasing. You can see the tooth of the paper, so I want to blend it in. I'm going to push the compressed charcoal into the paper, and then I might have little bits of it that are looking textured like that, but most of it smooth. So now what I have in my mind, I'm thinking space. It's like It's everywhere. It's abstract. It definitely has a lot of energy space. I think when I started drawing, I would have gone straight in black and done the whole area black, but I know now to hold back a little bit and slow it down. I'll just do patches of black, move them around, work out how that works, and then decide whether to go darker or lighter. So it's a pulling and a pulling activity. And you see, it's actually quite physical when you start working with tone. You really need to go with the energy of it. And that's how our body relates to the drawings. And that's why it's good to warm up before you start drawing so that everything's in sync. Because you use everything. It's just not just eyes and analytic thinking. It's like your body needs to be in tune as well. So I think I could work up the relationship between these three drawings a little bit longer. But in general, I think that's I'm pretty happy with that. I can actually add a bit more energy in the background here with the eraser. And I could probably spend like another hour on this drawing, I think, to refine it. But I think generally this is the beginning of a drawing that I think I would really enjoy working on and to continue layering. And the working with the beat and getting that mid-tone in is a really good start to tonal drawing and understanding and switching your brain from line drawing into, right, okay, now we're working with light and dark to describe form.